Am I the jerk for telling my spouse off for disrupting my household help? Here's the revised text. So, a little background. In our country, it is common for households to have part-time helpers who work in multiple apartments within a society. They typically come in for 1 to 2 hours a day to cook and clean. I have a cook and a cleaning lady. My work schedule as a 36-year-old man working in operations is very irregular. Sometimes I have to work during the day, sometimes at night, and occasionally I am away for a few days at a stretch. I have a cook who comes in at her convenience and prepares meals for the day. Since I cook myself, I usually leave instructions for tasks like making bread and chopping vegetables. I then finish the cooking according to my taste. Sometimes I let the cook make complete meals if I know I will be too exhausted to cook. I trust this cook to do the work and keep my kitchen clean, whether I am home or not, and have made arrangements for her access. It is convenient because she is tech-savvy and able to follow instructions well. While her food is not particularly delectable, she does her job fairly well. My 29-year-old wife works in another city and visits me every now and then for a couple of days a month, or I go to visit her. Last week, she decided to take some remote work and stayed for a week. I had some days off, so I cooked for her during that time. During the week, the cook had planned to take her paid days off. She also could not make the food according to my wife's preferences when I was not home for a workday, as my wife was deciding the menu. The next day, the cook took a sick day, causing inconvenience to my wife during her busy workday. My wife also disliked the food preparation because she follows a very strict diet and is very picky about its preparation. Where my wife lives, the cook makes delicious food, although I find it too oily and spicy. I am particular about the amount of oil, salt, and spices in my food. I reprimanded the cook for this, but my wife wanted me to fire her outright. Even though I told her I would take care of it the next time she comes over or replace the cook when she moves in permanently, in a month, or for a longer duration, my wife, who was leaving the next day, went ahead without asking me and made arrangements to hire another cook. It is a small community, and my cook found out. Now, she is acting strangely and fears for her job security, which is affecting the quality of her work. I feel there is no scope for her to improve the cooking. I told my wife off and expressed my upset that she went behind my back. I told her it was not her place to do this and that she has overstepped. It adds to my workload of now finding another cook who can take instructions, cook according to my needs and timings, and be trusted with my kitchen and its cleanliness. It takes a few weeks for anyone new to actually start working according to my requirements. My wife feels that I am choosing this cook over her and would not apologize for trying to improve my lifestyle according to her standards. I wanted to keep the cook until my wife moves in and then replace her with someone who can do meal preparations according to my wife's preferences. Am I the antagonist for telling my wife this is not in her purview? Nothing you have done here makes me think you are the jerk. Your wife had no right to reprimand or fire your maid behind your back, especially if you had already told her you would take care of it. While these decisions can be made jointly, she completely disregarded your point of view. If your wife doesn't pay the maid's salary, then she has no authority to fire her. Am I the jerk for moving out alone and not with my stepsister and lying about where I'm going to college? My dad and stepmom were both widowed when my stepsister and I were 5 years old. They met a year later and became widowed parent friends. I always believed they started dating about a year after my mom and my stepsister's dad died, but they do not want to be honest about moving on so quickly, especially when they have kids. We would all hang out together during the day and have late nights at each other's houses for a couple of years. Even back then, I struggled to get along with my stepsister. She was always a sensitive child. She was shy, quiet, and very delicate to any kind of negativity or correction. I am also quiet and introverted, so we were similar. However, I was supposed to be her best friend, according to my dad. I was expected to be gentle with her, be there for her, help her with stuff, and make her laugh. It was annoying back then, and when my dad and stepmom admitted they were dating, I really hated that I was now stuck with her. She stuck to me in school, would track me down and follow me around. My dad told me I should love having a sister my age. I told him I did not. He told me to think about how great it could be. I told him I wanted to spend time with friends without her. He said she was my best friend. She never could make her own friends. She is very hard to get close to. She hardly talks. She will talk if it is just us, but it is so painful. She never wants to do anything and just follows me around. There were times I would leave and go spend time with friends, and she would cry, and I would get into trouble for leaving her. Then our half-siblings were born, and it was a difficult situation. I love my half-siblings. It was clear I loved them but not my stepsister. My stepmom made that a very big deal and told me I should not love some siblings more than others, and that I should love everyone. She also accused me of turning my half-siblings against my stepsister. However, she never wanted to play with them or speak to them. Yet she would get upset when they favored me too. Mostly, she hated that I favored them over her. I never wanted to spend time with her. I always had to be forced to. It showed. That did not help. Family therapy was quit after 4 months because my dad and stepmom did not like that so much focus was put on helping my stepsister branch out instead of helping us come together as sisters. For 2 years, my dad, stepmom, and stepsister were planning for both of us to go to college together and move out together so we could travel at the same time and settle in together. I made plans behind their back with my grandpa. Against their wishes, I moved out in June and moved in with my grandpa for the summer. I will be starting community college in this town when school starts back up. My dad finally found out. He and my stepmom were already upset that I moved out without my stepsister, and now they are upset that we will not be in the same school. Dad was angry that I lied to him for 2 years. I told him he left me with no choice. Am I the asshole? I think you are not in the wrong here. Your dad and stepmom made every possible wrong choice by shoving the responsibilities of your obviously neurodivergent stepsister onto you, instead of helping her themselves. You are 18 and an adult, and you are not responsible for looking after your stepsister as she goes to college. They don't get to decide that she is your best friend, or dictate the rest of your lives to make themselves more comfortable. Am I the jerk for telling my mom to shut up and accept that my wife and I aren't naming our kids the way she and dad named me and my siblings? My wife and I, both in our late 20s, had our first child together in June. Before he was born, there was a lot of talk about names from different family members on both sides, but the pressure to reveal the name was particularly strong from my side. We did not tell anyone what the name would be until our son was born and we had left the hospital. My parents were disappointed when we announced our son's name. My family is very traditional in how they name children. We were each named after grandparents, and they feel that everyone should follow this practice. My wife's family does not have a tradition when it comes to naming babies. They just choose names without any fuss or insistence on certain ones. However, my wife's family tends to favor more uncommon and unusual names. My wife's and my tastes align more closely with her family's preferences than with mine. This is how we ended up choosing the name Hollis for our son. My parents expected our son to be named Jack, after my father, or Parker, after my father-in-law. Their expectations led to their disappointment and reaction. They questioned our choice to break tradition, and I explained that it was not a tradition my wife's family followed, and we decided we would not adhere to it either. Over the last couple of months, both sets of parents have questioned our choice and tried to discuss other names for future children. My mother has been the most persistent. She asked why we chose a name so unlike those in our family. I explained that our family was not the only one involved, and that we did not consider family preferences when choosing the name. We selected a name that we liked. She pointed out that our tastes were similar to my in-laws, and I agreed but clarified that it was about my wife's and my preferences, not my in-laws. I told her I was done discussing it, and since then, I have either changed the topic or ended the conversation when she brings it up. We had a naming ceremony on Saturday, and my mother decided to dig in her heels about the name. She told me we had picked a stupid name, she hated it, and she wanted us to change it to Jack or Parker. She argued that we had no business breaking a long-held family tradition, and that such traditions exist to prevent people from choosing terrible names. She also insulted my in-laws, suggesting they must be smug about having grandchildren with what she considered stupid names. I lost my temper. I told her to stop and accept that we would not name our children the way she and my father named me and my siblings. I told her she would need to leave and learn to be more respectful, because I would not tolerate insults against my wife or her family. My mother was upset about being told to stop and felt I was rude to her face. I thought her behavior was unacceptable. Am I the antagonist in this situation? You are not the problem. If the child isn't theirs, they don't get to decide the name. If they have a naming tradition, it doesn't matter. It's still not their decision. They have no right to insist the name be changed, and should not badmouth anyone for the name choice. Tell them to either grow up and accept the name or look forward to not seeing their grandkids. Am I the jerk for bringing up voice recordings to my stepdaughter from her late mom during marriage counseling? I, a 36-year-old female, have been married to my husband Nate, a 40-year-old male, for the last 7 years. My stepdaughter Jessie, a 14-year-old female, is from Nate's first marriage. Nate's first wife passed away when Jessie was 3. In her final months, she recorded messages for Jessie. She put the audio on her old computer, on an old MP3 player for Jessie, on a couple of flash drives, and Nate has backups. His late wife's parents have a backup, as do her sister and brother. I was aware of the voice messages when Nate and I were still very new. He talked about them and how important they had become to Jessie, who was 5 when Nate and I met. He also told me he wasn't looking for a new parent for Jessie. He wanted a partner to be more of a fun family member and support. This person could not force or push the relationship. His late wife's shoes could not be filled. I agreed and told him being a fun family member sounded great. Nate's inconsistent about my role in Jessie's life since we married. Jessie doesn't want me to be her parent, but sometimes Nate does. When she's having a bad day or she's sick and Nate's at work or not home, she doesn't come to me. She just plays the voice recordings of her mom. It makes me feel very useless because if Nate is around and stays home with her when she's sick, or he's around when she's sad, she cuddles with him or looks for comfort and reassurance from him. She still listens to her voice notes, but not as much. Whereas she'll tell me she's fine. She has lied to my face and said nothing was wrong. Even if I could see she wasn't and tried to offer some comfort, she'd brush me off and listen to the voice notes. But Nate and his family would complain when I wasn't staying home with her. I told him I felt useless being home with her, and he told me it's because I wasn't her parent and she didn't need me like him. Nate brought up concerns that after all these years, Jesse and I aren't close. We started marriage counseling to talk through everything. He said his biggest concern was that he does not feel like I have made any progress in my relationship with Jesse and that I'm too hands-off. I said I am there for Jesse as much as she wants me to be, but I'm not forcing anything like I was told. There are very few things Jesse will say yes to doing with me or coming to me with. Typically, she'll be fine coming to the store with me or asking me to drive her to the store. She's good watching Disney movies with me. She also enjoys playing some video games with me, but she doesn't come to me with her problems, and when I offer help, she doesn't want it. I told him I don't really know what he expects. When I'm the only person available when she's not doing good, she turns to the voice recordings. Nate accused me of being jealous and said bringing up the voice notes in marriage counseling was wrong and made it sound like I wanted to get rid of them. I never said that, but he told me they never needed to be mentioned. Am I the asshole? I think you are not in the wrong here. Nate is being inconsistent about the role he wants you to have in Jesse's life, flip-flopping between wanting you to be a parent and not. It's completely reasonable to bring up the voice recordings in counseling because they play a significant role in Jesse's emotional processing and your relationship dynamics. Marriage counseling should be a space for open discussion, and Nate's reaction to you expressing your feelings seems unfair. Ultimately, you're respecting the boundaries Nate set from the beginning, and he needs to understand that. Am I the jerk for telling my dad in front of his ILs that I'd rather live with my grandparents? After my mother died, my father relied on her parents for 3 years to take care of me. I was 3 years old when my mother passed away. They would pick me up at 7 a.m. from my father's house and take me to their home. My father would then pick me up at 8 p.m. after he was finished with work and errands. They were more like parents to me than he was. He worked 6 days a week, and typically, on most Sundays, I spent at least 4 or 5 hours with them as well. They took me to my first day of school, picked me up early if I was sick, and were there when I was unwell. My earliest memories are of my time with them. I do not really remember my father from back then. This changed when my father met Beth. One minute I was going to my grandparents' house every day, and then Beth moved in with us. Suddenly, I was home with her instead. My father and grandparents fought about it a lot, and he ended up telling me when I was 7 years old that I was not going to see them anymore because he and Beth were getting married. A month before the wedding, I was sitting in front of a judge and being asked questions about my father, my grandparents, and other things. The judge was nice. I do not remember a lot of our conversation, but afterward I did get to see my grandparents again. My father was not happy. I was 10 years old when my grandparents admitted that they had to take my father to court to see me again. My father hates that I see my grandparents as much as I do. I meet them 3 days a month, 1 overnight a month, and for a day around my birthday and Christmas. He hates that I leave my half-siblings behind to go and see them. There are times he has talked about going back to court and has asked me if I would say I do not like going without my siblings, and I always tell him I would not say that. Beth hates my grandparents too, but for a different reason. She blames them for me rejecting a closer relationship with her because they never allowed me to feel like I did not have a mother. And I do feel that way, kind of. It is hard to describe. I know my mother is not here. I cannot speak to her, but I still do not feel motherless. I do not want to have that kind of relationship with Beth, and it upsets her. I do not think it is appropriate for her to want that so badly, because I am sure she would hate to be forgotten by my half-siblings. I do not like her much for that. My father complains more about my grandparents now than he did when I was younger. My half-siblings are old enough to know I go to my grandparents and they cannot come. He also knows I prefer being with my grandparents and he hates it. Beth's parents, siblings, and their spouses were at our house Saturday night for a dinner party. My father was complaining about my grandparents to them, and everyone was acting like my grandparents were bad people for taking my father to court and for not letting me forget my mother. During the party, my father said that he would never understand why I want to go there so badly still. I said I would rather live with my grandparents than him. Everyone went quiet, and my father made me go to my room. He was so mad yesterday, and he told me I should know better than to try and humiliate him like that. Am I the antagonist? Your dad and his wife are the ass here. Your grandparents gave you stability when you most needed it, and your father should be grateful that they want to maintain a relationship with you. It's unfortunate that your dad envisioned a different relationship, but bad-mouthing your grandparents will only push you farther away. Most states allow children to decide where they want to reside, so it might be worth having a conversation with your grandparents. Am I the jerk for telling my spouse it's not okay they worked a 12-hour day on my birthday? It's my birthday today. For the other 51 Mondays of the year, my husband has been home before dinner. Today he left at 6 a.m. and just got home at 6 p.m. For all other birthdays in our family, I always make it special. We have cake for breakfast. We go out for an early and fun dinner to make the person feel it's a special day. He told me last week he'd booked this job for today. I said, "Oh, that's my birthday." He said he hadn't looked at the date, so he didn't realize it was my birthday. He said his client was getting the keys to his new house today, so he wanted all the electrical work done. My husband is an electrician. He had booked in 2 other people to work with him. He said, We'll get something for dinner. At 5 p.m., the kids are hungry. The toilet training 3-year-old is grumpy, and I literally can't cook anything other than boiled eggs and toast safely while I have him on my hip. To add insult to injury, he's just been away for 2 days because I told him he looked exhausted and needed a break. He works hard to maintain the finances for our family. I had a big corporate job before we had children, which I had to leave when we had them, or else I'd never see them. I have worked hard teaching myself a new profession and have just started turning a profit. I'm so mentally exhausted. My youngest is so attached to me I can't even use the restroom without him touching me. Before we had children, I had lots of social interaction, and I loved it. I feel so isolated, and I often go a full day or more without talking to someone over the age of 5. He knows I struggle with this. Am I the bad person for being angry at my husband for working all day on my birthday? I felt so upset I had to take a walk when he came home and left the kids with him. I probably could have prepared a better dinner, but I'm too upset, and I'm all over their nutrition the other 364 days of the year. It's all I had the energy to muster. He knows I was upset when he first told me he was working that full day. I knew based on what he had to do and where it was that it'd be a big day. It's completely normal to be upset, but it's also important to understand that sometimes work commitments can't be easily rescheduled. Many people celebrate birthdays on the weekends because weekdays are often filled with work and other responsibilities. Given that he's the main breadwinner and works hard to support the family, it's understandable that he might have booked a job without realizing it was on your birthday. Celebrating on the weekend can be a good compromise, allowing for a more relaxed and enjoyable time together. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.